But first, I noted in my Sunday column that the culture warriors and those who hate our country and our way of life would come for Anzac Day next. Well, today they did. Pippa Tandy is her name. She's the convener of Teachers for Palestine and herself a Victorian secondary school teacher. Well, she had a ding-dong argument with Melbourne radio host Tom Elliott, claiming that Australia Day celebrated war, it exploited children, and shouldn't be taught or commemorated the way it still is.
And it's being used for ideological purposes. It's not simply remembering sacrifices. A lot of people have contacted us. We're in connection with hundreds and hundreds of teachers, and not just in Victoria, but across Australia, who say, please help us. We are sick of this, having to do this ideological work for arms companies and the government.
Quite apart from my horror that anyone that historically ignorant is anywhere near a classroom, was my anger that we now have a movement of hard-left activists who want to do to Anzac Day what they've in part succeeded to do to Australia Day, to tear down the national symbols that unite us, to make us feel shame about our history, and in part perpetuate the myth that it's white, colonial and male, as most of our soldiers have been, or certainly those in the First and Second World Wars, or they're automatically undeserving of any commemoration, despite the fact that we wouldn't be free if it were not for their valour. So if you thought that on Thursday, on Anzac Day, you meant to pause for a moment to honour our war dead, to give thanks for their sacrifice and to cherish those freedoms that they'd fought for, well, you'd be wrong. Apparently, so say these teachers, and it's all tied up, they say, with arms dealers. And then this rubbish too.
The Anzac troops in the Middle East were actually involved in basically a European project to break up parts of the Arab territories, to divide them up among European states, and part of that involved clearing Palestinians out of the area.
Wrong. The Anzacs, mostly the light horse, whose famous charge at Beersheba was the last major mounted attack in history, were clearing out the Ottoman armies and liberating the Arabs, for that's what they were known for in those days, not Palestinians, from forcible inclusion in the then corrupt and incompetent Ottoman Empire. Now, this teacher tried to claim too that World War I was an imperialist war. Well, it was fought between empires, but one of them was the British Empire, the empire that stamped out slavery, fought and defeated German militarism and then defeated German Nazism, and also gave birth to the most free, fair and prosperous societies on earth, including Australia. The teacher, Pippa Tandy, was especially down on the British Empire, but Elliott, to his credit, took her on.
Well, I'd say that the British Empire is not a noble cause.
Sorry, you wouldn't be here without the British Empire.
Precisely, of course I wouldn't. What does that mean?
Well, but if you hate it so much, why not leave? I mean, if it's such an ignoble
Don't tell me
cause.
I hate it so much, okay?
And yes, there was a massacre at Surafend in modern-day Israel, when some New Zealand, Australian and British soldiers killed upwards of 40 local Arabs after one of their own had been murdered, after which compensation was paid to rebuild the village. But this argument wasn't just about history 100 years back. This was all about claiming that Australia and the Anzacs are somehow to blame for today's horrors in Gaza. The genocide in Palestine today, said the teacher, is all part of the same imperial push. So British Empire equals Anzacs equals imperialism equals genocide. And this presumably is the kind of historically ignorant, prejudiced brainwashing that Teachers for Palestine are inflicting on our kids. Is it any wonder that our social cohesion's under strain and that anti-Semitism is rife on the streets if our kids are being force-fed this diet of falsehoods? On top of climate change alarmism, on top of gender confusion, with our teachers more focused now on pronouns in the periodic table, our slump in international rankings, we can see why. But don't think that ambivalence towards Anzac Day is confined to the left-wing fringes of the Teachers' Union. The Morrison government's rule that public servants had to take our national holidays, well, that's been changed. The Albanese government now allows public servants with ideological objections to public holidays associated with our national symbols, like Australia Day, like Anzac Day, like the King's birthday, to work instead and then take another day off in lieu. As Shadow Veterans Affairs Minister Barnaby Joyce, who'll join me shortly, says, this is a deliberate attempt to dilute the importance of Anzac Day. And it is, from a government that's running down our armed forces at exactly the time they need to be built up. And this is why the days we commemorate, the days we celebrate, the flags our leaders choose to stand behind matter as much as they do.